indicating that people are dying because they don't have medical supplies. People are dying because, they don't have food supplies. They don't have, as you mentioned, probably the necessary staples as well. Is a serious cause for concern.
The ICRC's requests for access have repeatedly been denied, and there are hundreds of thousands of people living under a similar siege across the country. In this area, there are tanks on all sides. Only one route sporadically opens, and it's high risk. Presented with the tough choice between weapons and food, the rebels say they have to choose weapons. Otherwise, they will all be slaughtered by the regime. 9-year-old Ahmad had a neurological disorder, and there were no nutrients, no food, no medicine to sustain his already weak body. People are eating leaves off the trees to stave off the hunger, Dr. Abu Samir tells us. Adults can force themselves to handle it, but the children can't. Some people rely on vegetables they can grow in their gardens, he adds. And this doesn't give one enough vitamins. There are no proteins, no fats. With little or no food and medicine simply unavailable, anyone with any sort of medical condition simply cannot fight it off. Imad had part of his intestines removed 2 months ago after he was hit by shrapnel in the abdomen. But there was no way to provide him with the amino acids and proteins his body needed to recover. The main reason is a complete lack of food ingredients that supports a child's immune system, Dr. Abu Samir tells us. We're told Imad died the day we spoke to the doctor. We cannot independently verify the authenticity of the videos or the causes of these children's deaths. The ICRC also can't confirm how they died or indeed how many people are in this condition, a point of immense frustration for them.
This is what needs to be highlighted. These reports cannot be confirmed, for example, by international organizations because they have not had access, and that lack of access is the main concern.
Unless the siege is broken, the doctor says, this is just the beginning. 2-year-old Ibrahim is another one of the innocent victims. The day after this video was shot, he took his final breath. Arwa Damon, CNN, Beirut.
In less than 10 hours, Australians will go to the polls in the country's national elections. It is widely tipped that the opposition leader Tony Abbott and his Conservative Party will win power. The current Prime Minister Kevin Rudd regained the leadership in the party vote just a few months ago. But as Andrew Stephen reports, political infighting may end the ruling party's 6-year reign.
As the night of the long knives. Back in June 2010, the ruling Labor Party shocked a nation and dumped its leader, Kevin Rudd.
This has been a very busy 2.5 years.
Replacing him with his deputy, Julia Gillard.
Thank you very much.
Many saw it as the most spectacular stab in the back in Australian political history. But it was never an easy prime ministership for Julia Gillard.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not.
Almost 3 years into her leadership, an ugly row over sexism, rumblings within her own party, and a dismal performance in the opinion polls left Julia Gillard exposed.
Today I'm announcing that I will be a candidate for the position of leader of the Parliamentary Labor Party.
Gillard was ready. Finally, a chance to silence Kevin Rudd for good.
Can you win?
I believe anybody who enters the ballot tonight should do it on the following conditions: that if you win, you're Labor leader; that if you lose, you retire from politics.
We have just conducted the ballot. There was a spill for the position of leadership. I can announce the result. It is Kevin Rudd, 57 votes, Julia Gillard, 45 votes.
True to her word, Gillard retired from politics, taking some of her key front benchers with her.
Kevin Rudd has been elected as leader of the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party. I congratulate Mr Rudd on his election.
Kevin Rudd was sworn in as Prime Minister for the second time. He could now take aim at his bitter rival, the Conservative Liberal Party leader, Tony Abbott, a Rhodes Scholar, devout Catholic, and if the opinion polls are anything to go by, Australia's next Prime Minister. Andrew Stevens, CNN, Hong Kong.
The U.S. Congress is expected to vote next week on possible military action in Syria. The White House is lobbying for a yes vote, saying that the world can't afford to let chemical weapons used to go unpunished. House leaders on both sides of the aisles are backing the president's call to action, but a significant number of lawmakers remain undecided, and the outcome of the vote is no means certain. CNN's chief congressional correspondent, Dan Abbas, explains how ordinary Americans are saying no to what they call another Middle East war.
For several reasons, not the least of which is what you mentioned, and that is that members of Congress are hearing back home deep opposition from the people who sent them here.
We sent you to stop the war.
For undecided lawmakers, watching what happened to pro-Syria bombing Senator John McCain back home is a cautionary tale.
This is what I think of Congress. They are a bunch of marshmallows. Why are you not listening to the people and staying out of Syria? It's not our fight.
Even for a town hall veteran like McCain, this was rough.
We cannot afford to turn Syria into another Iraq or Afghanistan. I beg you.
Lawmakers are hearing that kind of opposition all across the country. It's part of the reason even the president's most loyal supporters, like members of the Black Caucus, are very wary of authorizing a strike.
Of course, there's a large number of them that say, we don't want you to go to war.
A House Democratic leadership source insists to CNN the majority of lawmakers are still persuadable because they have not yet been briefed. The problem for the president is how many, especially fellow Democrats, are reluctant even after attending classified briefings intended to persuade them.
Where are our allies and what will they do? I know the 37 nations have said that they would support us, but what does support mean?
Democrat Tulsi Gabbard is a combat veteran of the Iraq War.
And seeing firsthand the extreme costs of war, both overseas as well as here at home, is something that is giving me a unique perspective, but great pause.
She is like many who don't question whether Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapons, but do question Obama officials' ability to answer key questions in public or private about military contingencies after the U.S. bombs, like what if Assad finds a way to use chemical weapons again?
Do we strike again? Well, that's the definition of further entanglement. That's the definition of our becoming deeply involved in a war.
Now, there will be even more classified briefings for lawmakers today, as there have been virtually every day this week. Most undecided lawmakers who we talked to really are doing their homework, even attending more than one of these briefings, in addition to making phone calls on their own to members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and people like that to try to get a handle on some of those questions, particularly with regard to the military operation and contingencies after this first operation. But many say that what would help is a presidential primetime address. We expect to actually see that in the next few days, and lawmakers are saying it would not only help them, but more importantly, again, their constituents who are calling them and overwhelmingly saying, please vote no.
And before we go, a reminder of our headline-making stories once again. 15 U.S. Peace Corps volunteers are set to be deployed to the country's basic and secondary education sector after taking their oath of allegiance at the swearing-in ceremony. Severe food shortage is hitting parts of Syria as world leaders remain divided over the possible military strike against the Assad regime. And Australians are prepared to go to the polls in the country's national election, but the ruling party under the stewardship of Prime Minister Kevin Rudd faces the prospect of being voted out amidst internal wrangling. That brings us to the end of the news. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned and enjoy our range of interesting programs. Until then, I am Abubakar Dabo.
Nini nena, nyo bokure umi.